Imagine being 8 years old, vanishing on your bike for 10 hours with no phone, no GPS, and only one rule: be back by dinner. In the 1970s, this was ordinary childhood. Kids roaming a 5-mile radius, inventing adventures to fight off boredom because there were only 3 TV channels. Today, letting kids disappear all day would get you reported. Back then, it built fearless creativity. How did that freedom vanish? And what did we lose when the golden age of growing up ended? The real story starts now. Every kid in the 1970s knew the boundaries of their own private universe. That universe stretched far beyond the front yard. For most, it started at the curb and ended somewhere you could barely see from your porch, sometimes 2, 3, even 5 miles away. If you had a bike, your world was as big as you could pedal before lunchtime. There was not a map taped to the fridge, and there was not a parent tracking your every move. You just knew. The creek was a mile east. The old railroad bridge was on the far side of the park, and the corner store, if you had a quarter, sat exactly 3 stop signs away. A typical Saturday meant covering real distance. You would leave home in the morning, maybe with a friend or two, and loop through the neighborhood, cutting behind houses, slipping through alleys, crossing empty lots. Some kids would make it as far as the next town over. Nobody blinked if you said you had ridden out to the lake and back. The be back by dinner rule did not mean you would be within shouting distance. It meant you would be out of sight, out of earshot, and sometimes out of anyone's immediate knowledge for hours on end. Retrospective studies and hundreds of first-hand accounts agree. The average child's range in the 1970s was at least a mile or 2, often 3, and sometimes 5. In Britain, a landmark 1971 study found most 10-year-olds could travel up to 6 miles alone or with friends. American kids told similar stories, biking for ice cream, walking to baseball fields, or just wandering until something interesting happened. Getting lost was not a crisis. It was part of the adventure. You learned the shortcuts, the back trails, the places you were not supposed to go, but always did. There was no constant check-in, no phone call just to see if you were okay. The only real boundary was time. Be home when the streetlights flicker on, or when you hear your name echo through the neighborhood. Until then, the day was yours, and the map was wide open. Tree climbing was not just a pastime, it was a rite of passage. Every block had at least one tree with a perfect first branch, and every kid knew how high they had dared to go. 20 feet up? No problem. You would shimmy past creaking limbs, sneakers slipping on bark, heart pounding, until you could see the whole neighborhood from your makeshift perch. No harnesses, no helmets, just a dare from a friend and the unspoken rule that you never ever admitted you were scared. Sometimes you would spot a kid frozen halfway up, weighing pride against gravity, and the only way down was to trust your own grip. When you were not in the trees, you were building forts. Not the kind you buy at the store or click together with plastic pieces. These were forts you built from whatever you could drag, borrow, or scavenge. Old plywood, fallen branches, a sheet someone's mom did not want anymore. One summer, my friends and I turned a pile of leftover lumber into a fortress behind the Petersons' garage. We hammered rusty nails, argued over blueprints drawn in the dirt, and declared ourselves kings of a kingdom nobody else could see. Rain or shine, that fort was headquarters for every secret meeting, every battle, every plan to launch a paper airplane army across enemy lines. As dusk settled, the air filled with the soft glow of fireflies. Mason jars became treasure chests, each one flickering with a dozen tiny lanterns. There was a whole ritual to it, poking holes in the lid, chasing the blinking lights across the yard, counting who caught the most. You would sit on the grass, legs scratched and dirty, watching your jar pulse like a living constellation. No one needed to tell you when to stop. The fireflies faded, the streetlights flickered on, and you knew it was time to head home. Those were the moments that made you feel brave, inventive, and just a little bit wild, skills you did not even know you were learning. The summer I turned 10, my best friend and I set out to dig a hole to China. We weren't just passing time, we were determined. We carried spiral notebooks for charts and a shift roster taped to the garage wall. We mapped out how many feet we would need to dig, calculated daily progress, and made a schedule so neither of us would have to dig alone in the heat. Each entry in the notebook tracked our depth, who dug when, and how many minutes we lasted before swapping out. We even drew diagrams of what we imagined we would find underground, lost coins, ancient bones, and if we got lucky, a tunnel straight through to the other side of the world. The project stretched past 5 weeks. We hit roots, rocks, and once a brick that felt like a sign we were getting close. Our parents mostly watched from the porch, amused as we borrowed buckets and flashlights from neighbors or traded chores for sturdier shovels. The hole never got deeper than 4 feet, but the notebook filled with measurements, shift logs, and sketches of imaginary creatures. Every day, we checked our progress with a tape measure, convinced that if we just kept at it, we would break through. By the time school started, the hole was half filled with rainwater, the charts were stained with dirt, and our hands were blistered. But we had learned how to plan, how to negotiate, and how to keep a straight face when someone's little sister wanted to join. Boredom had given us a saga and a legend that lasted long after the dirt settled. Most American kids in the mid-1970s had 3 television channels. Sometimes there were 4 or 5 if you were lucky. But for most of the country, Saturday morning cartoons and maybe 1 or 2 after-school shows were the extent of kid-friendly programming. If you missed your favorite cartoon, there was no way to catch up until the next week. PBS was around, but not every household could get a clear signal, and UHF channels were hit or miss depending on your antenna and where you lived. Cable television? That was still years away for most families. By noon, the television was a wasteland of soap operas, news, and game shows. Once the cartoons ended, the screen offered nothing for kids except boredom. This scarcity shaped everything. Boredom was not a bug, it was the whole system. You could not just flip through endless channels or scroll through YouTube. When the shows ended, the only option was to turn off the television and look for something to do. Playtime shifted outside by necessity, not just by choice. Neighborhoods became playgrounds, and the lack of on-demand entertainment forced kids to invent their own fun. A play specialist from the era described it as a golden age for creativity because the environment demanded it. Projects like digging a hole to China were not just about passing time. They were a direct response to the limits of the media landscape. The structure of the day, shaped by broadcast schedules and a lack of screens, sent kids back to their bikes, their forts, and their imaginations. Boredom thrived, and in that space, so did creativity. Mrs. Johnson lived 2 doors down, but it felt like she was everyone's grandmother. If you skinned your knee running through the alley, you did not go home. You went to her porch. She kept a tin of Band-Aids in her kitchen drawer and a bottle of mercurochrome that stung like fire, but you let her dab it on anyway, because she would follow it up with a homemade cookie and a story about her own childhood. She knew every kid's name on the block, who belonged to whom, who was allergic to bee stings, and who needed a little extra kindness. If a parent could not be found, Mrs. Johnson was the one who stepped in. No paperwork, no phone call, just a quiet understanding that kids looked out for each other and adults looked out for all the kids. Mr. Peterson was the neighborhood fix-it man. His garage was a wonderland of tools, old bike parts, and coffee cans full of mismatched screws. If your chain slipped or your tire went flat, you wheeled your bike over to Mr. Peterson's driveway. He would show you how to patch a tube or realign a wheel, his hands moving slow and steady, letting you try each step yourself. Sometimes he would tell you about the time he rode his own bike across town as a boy, or how he once caught a fish bigger than your arm at the lake. He never talked down to you. He expected you to learn, to get your hands dirty, to take pride in fixing what was broken. These were not just acts of kindness, they were the invisible threads that held the neighborhood together. Every adult was a sort of informal guardian. If you got into trouble or needed help, you knew exactly which door to knock on. Parents trusted these neighbors because they all shared the same unwritten rules. Keep an eye out, lend a hand, treat every kid as your own. There was no official childcare, no background checks, no sign-up sheets. The neighborhood itself was the safety net. It meant you could wander far, try new things, take a few risks, knowing that if you needed help, someone would always be there. That is what made freedom possible. The quiet, everyday watchfulness of people like Mrs. Johnson and Mr. Peterson, who gave kids room to roam and a place to land when they needed it most. A few times every summer, something bigger than a backyard game took shape. The Hendersons' place was perfect for it. Flat grass, a big old maple for shade, and enough space to set up makeshift booths. It started with a flyer, hand-drawn in blue marker, taped to every mailbox on the block. The flyer read, "Neighborhood Carnival, Saturday, games, prizes, bring your pennies." Word spread fast. Kids claimed jobs. Someone ran the ring toss with painted soda bottles. Someone else manned the fishing game hidden behind a sheet, passing out prizes scavenged from junk drawers and cereal boxes. There was a beanbag throw, a lemonade stand, and a fortune teller's table run by the oldest Henderson girl, who wore her mom's scarf and made up mysterious futures for a nickel. For weeks, everyone chipped in. Cardboard signs appeared on fences, old blankets became picnic spots, and the grown-ups donated cookies or let kids raid the garage for supplies. The prize table was a jumble of yo-yos, plastic rings, and half-melted crayons, but nobody cared. On Carnival Day, the whole neighborhood turned out. Parents with lawn chairs, toddlers clutching paper tickets, even Mr. Franklin from the corner house, who never smiled, dropped by to try his luck at the coin toss. By the end of the afternoon, the cash box held $30 in nickels and dimes, destined for a charity someone had seen on the evening news. It felt like a fortune. The games wound down as the sun slipped behind the trees. Laughter echoed across the yard, and the last lemonade cups were stacked up just as the first streetlights flickered to life, always the sign that the day was over. That soft golden glow did not just mean curfew. It was the signal that every adventure, every gathering, every secret game had a natural ending. No one needed a watch or a reminder. When the streetlights came on, you just knew. It was time to say goodbye, to wander home in the warm dusk, pockets full of tickets and memories. For a few hours, the backyard carnival turned a patch of grass into the center of the universe, a place where everyone belonged and every kid had a part to play. Every backyard had its own secret geography, but the real treasures were the places that did not belong to anyone at all. Out past the last row of houses, there was a storm drain, a hulking corrugated pipe half buried in the creek bed. To most adults, it was just part of the neighborhood's plumbing. To us, it was the entrance to an underground world. We spent entire afternoons drawing maps of where the tunnel might lead, inventing stories about lost civilizations and buried treasure waiting in the darkness. Someone brought a flashlight once, but no one was brave enough to go more than a few steps inside. The unknown was what made it magic. The tunnel could have stretched all the way to the next town, or maybe even to the center of the earth. We argued about it, drew elaborate diagrams in spiral notebooks, and planned expeditions that never quite happened. The important thing was the possibility. This kind of play did not come from a box or a screen. Most toys in the 70s were simple: plastic soldiers, wooden blocks, battered trucks with missing wheels. The real fun started when the toys ran out and you had to invent something new. Cardboard boxes became spaceships, sticks turned into swords, and a length of rope meant you could build a pulley system over the fence. Electronic toys did exist by the late 70s, Simon, Merlin, a handful of blinking handheld games, but they were rare, expensive, and did not hold a candle to a backyard full of raw materials. Most of us never owned one. The best toys were the ones you made up on the spot, using whatever you could find. Imagination ruled. That freedom to transform the ordinary into the extraordinary was the heart of childhood. The storm drain was not just a pipe, it was a portal. The backyard was not just grass, it was a kingdom. Imagination filled every empty space, and the world felt endless because nothing was off limits. Before the rules tightened, before the boundaries closed in, we lived in universes of our own design, one secret tunnel at a time. In the spring of 1979, a 6-year-old boy named Eaton Patz vanished on his way to the school bus in Manhattan. His disappearance dominated headlines for weeks. For millions of parents, the face on the missing posters, Eaton's wide eyes and his bowl haircut, became a symbol of every parent's worst fear. The story did not fade with the news cycle. Instead, it grew. That same year in Atlanta, a series of murders took the lives of at least 29 black children and young adults. Each new report brought fresh anxiety, and the sense that nowhere was truly safe anymore. Television news, once a background hum, now delivered a steady stream of warnings into living rooms across the country. Stories about missing children moved from local broadcasts to national news, and soon to the covers of magazines and the front pages of newspapers. By the early 1980s, the image of a missing child became a fixture on milk cartons, grocery bags, and even billboards. Crime reporting statistics show a sharp increase in coverage from 1979 to 1985. The numbers themselves had not changed much, but the way the media told the story made it feel like danger was everywhere. Parents began to question the old rules. The "be back by dinner" contract started to feel reckless, even negligent. School assemblies and public service announcements hammered home the message, "Trust no stranger, stay close to home, always check in." For decades, childhood had meant autonomy. Almost overnight, freedom was replaced by vigilance. The era of wide-open neighborhoods and unsupervised adventure was ending, not because the world itself had changed, but because the story of the world had. The map shrank, and with it, the boundaries of childhood. Today, the average American child spends less than 5 minutes a day in unstructured outdoor play, while screen time tops 7 hours. As digital childhood becomes the new normal, the freedom and creativity that once defined growing up risk fading for good. The real question now is, what kind of memories will the next generation inherit? Let's not lose the magic entirely. Share your thoughts below. What do you remember most?